She was just a hotel maid, until one silent gesture changed everything. When she greeted the CEO in sign language, no one expected what happened next, especially not her. What was meant as kindness turned into a life she never imagined. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Did you see that? Whispered one of the office workers, her voice barely audible over the soft hum of early morning activity. Her eyes were wide, lips parted in disbelief. A few co-workers turned their heads, eyebrows raised. Some even stopped walking, holding their coffee cups mid-air as if frozen in time. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning. Or at least, it had started that way. The lobby of Zenith Corporations, a massive 80-floor skyscraper in the heart of the city, pulsed with corporate energy. It was a monument to ambition, glass walls gleaming, gold accents reflecting the morning sun, and the scent of polished marble blending with expensive cologne. Here, every second mattered. Assistants raced past with tablets, executives chatted briskly into earpieces, and security guards scanned the area with robotic precision. And then, there was Lena. She was the one person most people didn't notice. The quiet maid in the navy blue uniform. Her black hair was tied back in a neat bun, her face always calm, almost invisible to those who considered themselves too important to greet the cleaning staff. Lena arrived before sunrise each day, pushing a wheeled cart with supplies, wiping fingerprints off glass doors, and making sure every inch of the lobby gleamed. She never complained, never caused trouble, and never expected anyone to talk to her. But that morning, something different happened. Something that would ripple through the building like a dropped stone in still water. The elevator pinged, and the atmosphere shifted. Out stepped the one man who could silence an entire floor just by breathing. Blake Ellison, the CEO of Zenith Corporations. Tall, broad-shouldered, always in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. His presence was magnetic, yet intimidating. His gaze alone could reduce senior managers to stuttering interns. Known for being brilliant but brutally private, Mr. Ellison didn't tolerate inefficiency or unnecessary interaction. As he strode across the lobby, flanked by two assistants and a security detail, employees stood straighter, fell silent, and avoided direct eye contact. But Lena didn't move out of the way. She didn't panic. She didn't pretend not to exist. Instead, she did something no one expected. She looked up at the CEO with gentle eyes, and with a kind smile, she raised her hands and began to sign. Using American Sign Language, ASL, her fingers moved gracefully, clearly. "Good morning, sir. Hope you're well." It wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't even meant to be noticed. But in that instant, everything stopped. Mr. Ellison, mid-stride, paused. His assistants looked confused. Security hesitated. Employees nearby exchanged wide-eyed glances. One talked to the CEO. Especially, not the maid, and definitely not in sign language. Mr. Ellison turned his head and looked directly at her. His expression was unreadable, eyes piercing, mouth still. The pause stretched for a heartbeat too long. Then, without a word, he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod and walked on. The room remained frozen for a few more seconds before activity resumed, only now with a subtle buzz in the air. A conversation waiting to explode. "Did you see that?" Someone repeated, half whisper, half shock. "Did she just sign to him? What was that? Was that ASL? Why did he stop? She's in trouble. For sure." No one had ever seen anyone interact with the CEO like that, let alone a maid. And certainly not in a way that made him stop and acknowledge someone. Lena didn't respond to the whispers. She simply returned to her cleaning, calmly wiping down the glass wall of the lobby doors like it was just another day, but her hands trembled ever so slightly. She hadn't expected a reaction. She hadn't done it for attention. Signing came naturally to her. It was how she had always spoken, growing up with deaf parents in a quiet neighborhood where silence was the norm and ASL was love. To Lena, that moment had simply been a greeting. A respectful one. A human one. But to everyone else watching, it was something else entirely, something they couldn't explain. Something that felt out of place in a world built on power, titles, and invisible barriers. And what none of them knew, not even Lena, was that this silent greeting had set something in motion. A change. A secret, in a moment that would soon lead her to an unexpected destination she could never have imagined. By noon, the quiet moment in the lobby had become the loudest conversation in the building, from the basement mailroom to the executive lunch suite. Everyone was talking about Lena, the maid who used sign language to greet the most powerful man in the building. Did you see that maid? She signed at Mr. Ellison. Who does that? Does she even know who he is? Maybe she thought he couldn't talk or something. That's risky. She's probably getting fired today. The whispers multiplied like wildfire, carried from floor to floor by curious staff and nosy onlookers. Office group chats lit up. Someone even posted a blurry image from the security camera feed. Lena mid-sign. The CEO paused, looking at her. There were no explanations, no follow-up, no public reaction from the top floor. And in a place like Zenith Corporation's, silence was rarely a good sign. In the janitor's break room, Lena sat quietly, eating her homemade sandwich while the cleaning crew chattered around her. You really signed to him? Her coworker Carla asked, eyes wide. Girl, you've got guts. I wouldn't even look him in the eye. Lena just smiled gently, folding her napkin. It was just a greeting. But it's him, another whispered, glancing at the security camera above them. The CEO. He probably thinks you were mocking him or something. Lena shook her head. She hadn't done anything wrong. But that didn't stop the tension from building. Even her supervisor, a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Greaves, pulled her aside near the supply closet later that day. Her tone was low but urgent. You need to be careful, Lena, she said. I know you meant no harm, but this is a corporate structure. There are rules. You don't speak to executives unless spoken to. You certainly don't initiate contact, especially with him. I wasn't trying to cause trouble, Lena replied softly. It's just, that's how I greet people sometimes. Mrs. Greaves looked uneasy. I understand. But still, tread carefully. The CEO isn't someone who tolerates distractions. One mistake could cost you your position here. Lena nodded politely and went back to work. But a quiet chill had settled in her chest. Had she really overstepped? Would one simple act of kindness ruin everything? She thought back to that moment. In the lobby, how natural it had felt. How the gesture had just come out of her, instinctively. What none of the other employees knew. What they never even thought to ask. Was that Lena was fluent in ASL because she had to be. Her mother and father were both deaf. From the time she could form thoughts, she had used her hands to express love, joy, sadness, and every little thing in between. ASL was not just a language to her. It was part of who she was, sometimes, even. Now, when she was overwhelmed or emotional, Lena found herself signing quietly to herself, more out of comfort than communication. It was her safe space. When she saw the CEO that morning, distant, unreadable, untouchable, it just felt right to greet him in the most genuine way she knew how. She didn't expect him to respond. She didn't expect him to stop. She certainly didn't expect the entire office to turn her into a spectacle. Still, Lena kept her head down the rest of the day. She scrubbed sinks, dusted baseboards, and wiped windows, every movement quiet and careful. But she couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were watching her now. That whispers followed her down the hallway like shadows. And the worst part, she didn't know what the CEO was thinking. Did he understand the gesture? Was he offended? Amused? Confused? He hadn't said a word to anyone, not even a memo from his office. Just that one silent nod before walking away. That night, Lena barely slept. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment again and again. What if tomorrow she got called in and dismissed without a second thought? Would they tell her why? Would they even bother? As the first light of morning crept through her apartment window, Lena got up, ironed her uniform, tied her hair back, and prepared to face whatever would come. She reminded herself, you did nothing wrong. You were being kind. But deep down, something told her, today would not be like yesterday. And she was right, because at exactly 9:17 a.m., as she was wiping fingerprints off the lobby glass, two men in suits approached her with unreadable expressions. Miss Lena? One of them asked. She turned, clutching her cloth. The CEO would like to see you. Please come with us. Her heart dropped into her stomach. This was it. The consequences of a simple, silent gesture were about to unfold. Just after 9 a.m., the hallway outside the executive elevator was quiet. Almost too quiet. Lena was there, feather duster in hand. gently cleaning the intricate molding that lined the polished white walls. She always made sure the executive level looked perfect, even though she rarely saw anyone come or go from those towering glass doors. That morning, however, everything changed. She heard the sharp click of dress shoes against the marble. She turned and froze. Two tall men in dark suits were walking directly toward her. "Miss Lena?" one of them asked in a firm, professional tone. She blinked. "Why, yes. The CEO would like to see you. Please come with us." Her blood ran cold. This was it. Her worst fear realized. She was being called up, not to be thanked, not to be seen, but to be fired. Maybe even sued for disrespecting protocol. She had breached some invisible barrier, broken a rule no one ever says aloud. You don't address the CEO unless he addresses you. Her hand trembled slightly as she set the duster aside. She nodded quietly, heart pounding in her chest like a drum. As the two men guided her into the executive elevator, Lena felt the air shift. She had never set foot in it before. This elevator was lined with wood paneling and brass trim, a soft classical tune playing in the background. It moved swiftly but silently, no numbers lit up, no stops along the way. Straight to the top, floor 40. When the doors opened, Lena was greeted by a hallway unlike anything else in the building. The floors weren't just polished, they shined like glass. The walls were lined with modern art. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and leather, and not a single sound could be heard. It was peaceful, but in a way that made her more anxious. She was escorted to the large double doors at the end of the hallway, the office of Blake Ellison, the man whose nod had turned her life upside down the day before. The guards knocked once. "Come in," said a voice from within. The doors opened slowly. Inside, the room was bright, elegant, and massive. A wall of glass windows looked out over the skyline. A single long desk stretched across the middle of the room, and in front of the windows stood the CEO himself, Mr. Ellison, hands clasped behind his back, suit perfectly tailored, posture straight and still. Lena took a deep breath, stepped inside, and stood quietly, unsure whether to speak, move, or even breathe too loudly. Mr. Ellison turned slowly to face her, and then, with steady hands, he raised them and began to sign. "Thank you for greeting me in my language. You have no idea how much that meant to me." Lena's mouth fell open slightly. Her breath caught in her throat. He knew ASL. She responded instinctively, her hands moving in soft, practiced motions. "You understand ASL?" He nodded once. "Yes, I'm partially deaf. Most people don't." "No." He paused, his voice calm but sincere. "I've had hearing loss since I was a child. Surgery, speech therapy, technology, it helps. I've learned to blend in. But crowded rooms? Noisy environments? They exhaust me. They isolate me." He walked over to his desk, gesturing for her to sit. She obeyed, still stunned. Mr. Ellison continued. "In all my years at this company, not a single person has ever used ASL to speak to me. Not one. Not a board member. Not an executive. Not even my assistants." He looked at her directly. "You were the first. A maid. Someone everyone else overlooks. And yet you saw me." Lena's eyes filled with tears, not from fear now, but from the overwhelming wave of emotion and disbelief. She had grown up signing, communicating with her parents, comforting them, loving them through her hands. And now, that small habit, born of love, had connected her with the last person she expected. I didn't mean to intrude," she signed quickly. "It was just natural for me." Mr. Ellison smiled for the first time. That's what made it meaningful. He leaned back slightly, folding his arms. "Tell me, Lena, if you were given the opportunity, would you help this company become more inclusive? Help us build a workplace where people like me don't have to hide their hearing loss, where ASL isn't surprising, but supported?" Lena blinked in shock. Her mouth opened, but words failed her. So she signed instead. "Yes, absolutely. I'd love that." What she thought would be her last day at the company had just become the beginning of something she never dared to dream. Instead of being fired, Lena was offered something she never, ever dreamed of. She stood frozen for a moment in Mr. Ellison's grand office, expecting harsh words or at least a quiet dismissal. Instead, he had just looked her in the eyes and, in perfect American Sign Language, made an offer that left her speechless. "I'd like you to become our new executive assistant for inclusive communications," he signed. Lena blinked. Did she misunderstand me? She signed back, hesitating. "But I'm just a maid." Mr. Ellison gave a small, thoughtful smile, the kind that came from a deep place, not from habit. "Not just anything," he signed and said. "You saw what no one else did. You used kindness, not because you had to, but because it's who you are. That's the kind of leadership this company needs." He continued in a calm, deliberate voice, switching between speech and signs. "I want to build better bridges with our staff. I want a workplace where no one feels unseen or unheard, especially those like me. You'll help train teams in basic sign language, assist during meetings when communication barriers arise, and work with our diversity and inclusion department to reshape how we treat every person in this building, regardless of title." Lena felt her throat tighten. Her hands trembled, not from fear this time, but from emotion. A job she never asked for. A position born not of ambition, but authenticity. All because she had signed "Good morning." She nodded slowly, tears rising in her eyes. "Yes," she signed softly. "I'd be honored." Within days, Lena's world transformed. Gone were the cleaning supplies and utility carts. Instead, she stepped into a brand new office on the 18th floor, small but bright, with her nameplate on the door, "Lena Mendez, Assistant for Inclusive Communications." A crisp blazer replaced her uniform. She attended meetings with department heads, shadowed HR directors, and worked side by side with Mr. Ellison himself, helping him navigate team conversations using subtle signs or visual cues during presentations. And, just like that, everything began to shift. The same workers who once passed her without a glance now nodded in the hallways. Some stopped her to ask how to sign their names or say thank you. Others came to her for guidance, wanting to understand more about deaf awareness, about inclusion, about respect. Her first training session drew just 5 employees. By the third week, over 60 had signed up. From janitors to executives, they sat side by side, learning the alphabet in ASL, simple phrases like "good job," "do you need help," and "how are you today?" They laughed, stumbled, encouraged one another, and slowly, the culture of Zenith corporations began to evolve. The walls between departments seemed thinner, conversations more thoughtful. No longer was kindness mistaken for weakness, or silence mistaken for ignorance. People began to see one another, not just by job titles, but by humanity. Mr. Ellison, for the first time in his career, publicly shared that he was partially deaf. He credited Lena for giving him the confidence to embrace that part of his identity instead of hiding it behind polished speeches and high-tech hearing aids. "Sometimes," he said during a company-wide town hall, "one small act can open a door you didn't even know existed." The entire staff applauded, many of them signing "thank you" instead of clapping. And Lena? She sat in the front row, hands on her lap, eyes misty. From cleaning the lobby floor to shaping the heart of a billion-dollar corporation, all because she had been herself. The power of one small, silent greeting had set a wave of change in motion. A moment that began with her hands had touched hundreds of hearts. Months passed, but Lena's story didn't fade. In fact, it only grew louder, in the most beautiful, unexpected ways. What began as a quiet gesture in a corporate lobby soon echoed through every corner of Zenith Corporations, then across other companies, industries, and finally, the internet. A simple moment, caught by security footage and later shared with permission, made its way to social media. A maid signing "good morning" to her powerful CEO, and his signed response touched hearts around the world. People didn't just see a promotion. They saw hope. They saw respect. They saw a bridge between silence and understanding. The comments poured in. "This made me cry. I'm hard of hearing, and I've never seen someone in a big company acknowledged like this. It's not about climbing the ladder. It's about kindness. Pure and simple. I just signed up for my first ASL class because of her." At Zenith, the shift that Lena helped spark continued to ripple outward. New hires received basic ASL training during orientation. Internal videos began featuring subtitles and interpreters. Feedback forms were made accessible in multiple formats. Inclusivity became more than a policy. It became a practice, lived out in meetings, break rooms, and conversations across the building. And Lena, she continued to shine. not just in her new role, but as a symbol of what's possible when people are seen not for where they came from, but for who they truly are. She was invited to speak at schools, conferences, and companies that wanted to hear her story firsthand. Lena, the once quiet maid, now stood in front of hundreds, sharing how a single act of kindness, one silent greeting, had rewritten her life as she began each talk the same way, by signing "Good morning," just as she had that day in the lobby. Then, she'd tell her story, not with pride in herself, but with hope for others. It's not about being noticed, she'd say. It's about noticing others. Whether someone's wearing a suit or a uniform, every person deserves to feel acknowledged. You never know who you're speaking to, or how much it might mean to them when you do. She encouraged people to learn basic sign language, even just a few phrases. To look eye to eye with janitors, delivery workers, assistants, anyone who often moved through the world unseen. To remember that dignity isn't something given by status, it's something we affirm through our everyday actions. Her message resonated deeply because it came from a place of lived truth. Executives began greeting staff and sign. Office walls once lined with silent portraits were now decorated with employee stories. Lena had unknowingly started a movement, not for fame or recognition, but out of pure human connection. She kept in touch with Mr. Ellison, who continued to credit her for helping him embrace his hearing loss instead of masking it. He shared how his family, for the first time, began using ASL around the dinner table, something even he had once been afraid to request. And one day, after a major event where Lena delivered a keynote speech to a standing ovation, he told her, "You taught us how to listen without sound. You reminded us that the smallest sign can carry the loudest message." Lena smiled, because deep down, she had always believed that respect didn't require a title, just a little heart, a little awareness, a little effort to meet people where they are, especially those used to being overlooked. Her story became a chapter in corporate leadership programs, a case study in HR textbooks, a moment replayed in classrooms to inspire the next generation. But for Lena, it was never about the fame or the applause. It was about her parents, who raised her in a world of silence. It was about her coworkers, who once walked past her without a glance and now stopped to sign "Good morning." It was about the young intern who once emailed her saying, "Thank you. I didn't think people like us belonged here until I saw you." And it was about anyone who ever felt small, unheard, or invisible. Her story served as a lasting reminder, one etched into the very walls of a once silent company, that sometimes the smallest act of respect can open doors no resume ever could. And sometimes the quietest voice in the room speaks the loudest of all. Belle, if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Speech Balloon, tell us, what's one small act of kindness you've witnessed or shared that made a big difference? Sparkles, on this channel, we believe every silent voice has a powerful story. Open Book, stay tuned for more real, emotional, and eye-opening stories that remind us it doesn't take much to change a life, just a little kindness. Thanks for watching, and remember, the smallest gesture can speak louder than words. Waving hand.